I was really fortunate to be on the panel last year. It was awesome. And so really glad to be able to support this again. We've kind of partnered a little bit with Grassroots Wildland Firefighters. We're using our Zoom account and our platform. And so we're really happy to have this relationship. So excited to hear from everybody. Please ask lots of questions, and there's going to be some great dialogue. And then I'll hand it over to Ben McLean from Grassroots as well.
Yeah, thank you, Riva. Thank you to everyone who has made this happen, Lily, Chris, and the many others who've been putting in effort over the years and continuing the effort. This is a really unfortunately unique, but not for long unique opportunity for some folks to hear from each other and support each other as we step foot by foot, right, 1 foot at a time up the hill into the 2024 and beyond. What does the wildland fire response system look like, and what does right look like, and how do we have that conversation, and how do we ensure that the best and brightest people are in the room and on the line with us together? And so I'm really excited to hear from the panelists. And like Riva said, please ask lots of questions. This represents a partnership with the Wildland Women in Wildfire group, as well as the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters and the Culture Committee within Grassroots Wildland Firefighters. And the Culture Committee was stood up just over a year ago because culture is something that we can influence. We don't have to wait for Congress. We don't have to wait for the agencies. It's up to us, and it's our duty to each other and to the public that we serve to create the wildland workforce that is capable of showing up for the public in a way that they deserve, and creating the environment that we all deserve to for the sacrifices we say yes to. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to a really great evening.
Sweet. I think that's me now. All right. Cool. Yeah, well, man, I was just thinking today, I believe that this is the 7th event that we've had. And so, yeah, my name's Chris Ives. I started this brainchild about 7 years ago now, I guess, with a good friend of mine, Megan Singleton. We were both in graduate school at Northern Arizona University. And I think we were out at the bar one night, and we were just lamenting about a lot of the, many challenges that we face as wildland firefighters, and just how the face of the organization, and what that needed to look like to be an accurate representation of the greater community that we have. And so at that time, I came through a background of conservation corps. And so we thought, hey, the best way to affect change in an organization is to start with the next generation. And so we focused primarily in those early panel discussions with, outreaching to conservation corps people in the greater Flagstaff, Arizona area. As well as Northern Arizona University School of Forestry and Fire Ecology, Student Association of Fire Ecology Clubs. And so that's where it started, and, kind of building mentorship programs and relationships with those folks, and then giving them, an opportunity to ask questions and helping them to enter the world of wildland firefighting, because it can be pretty intimidating, especially, for different demographics walking into a primarily white male dominated workforce. And so, so those first 2 events were at Northern Arizona University School of Forestry auditorium. And then due to the unfortunate circumstances of COVID, after that, after 2020, I think that was the last year we had it in person, but we also had it recorded and available for folks virtually. But then we went to complete virtual platform, and despite the unfortunate circumstances, it actually allowed us to reach a larger audience and kind of transform to become what it is today. So thank you so much to Megan and to all the panel members we've had over the years who, started this and made it what it is. So I'm happy to be here and learn. Every year I get to ask questions, and I feel like I learn so many new things. So thanks so much to all who have been part of this.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lily. Thank you for being here. And I just wanted to introduce some of our ground rules, which are assume good intent and listen as an ally, which means trying to understand before evaluating what people are saying. And I say that with the knowledge that this really is a space for allyship. There are many spaces that are so necessary where minorities and groups can just have time to be together, but this isn't one of those spaces. This is where we're welcoming all and to talk and to really celebrate these incredible women that are here tonight to talk with us and discuss their career paths and transitions and pivots as they moved forward in that path. And also to say that if you have questions, please be dropping them in the chat throughout the talk. Emily, Ellery, and Meredith will be monitoring those questions, and we'll choose some to ask at the end after we've had our conversation with the panelists. One other thing before I introduce our amazing speakers tonight, I wanted to introduce the mentorship program we've been putting together with grassroots and women in Wildland Fire. We're calling it Warming Fire, and so many thanks to Ben McLean for coming up with that name. But the idea behind this is that everyone needs a good mentor, and everyone in fire needs a good mentor, all genders and such. And the mentorship program, there have been some other ones that have come up, such as through the Association for Fire Ecology. And this will likely be wildland fire heavy, but for anyone who's interested in either being a mentor or having a mentor, we will drop our email as well as some of the surveys that you could fill out in the chat. And feel free to either email or submit that survey to let us know what your interests or needs are or what you think you could contribute in being a mentor. And we're just going to see how this goes. All of us here that are putting on this panel have had incredible mentors who have been there for us, and we'd like to try to facilitate that. So we're going to give it a shot. I have a feeling there will be more desire for mentors than those being willing to give time for mentorship, as everyone's so busy. But let's give it a shot. And after I introduce everyone, I'll be dropping links in the chat. And Emily, Meredith, and Ellery, if you're willing to do that right now as well, please do. So without further ado, I'd like to start introducing our amazing panelists. First of all, Dr. Melinda Adams, so honored that you're here tonight. Dr. Adams was our keynote at the Climate and Wildfire Institute Intentional Fire convening this past fall, and just does such incredible work on both studying and supporting Indigenous cultural fire. And she's currently the Langston Hughes Assistant Professor at the University of Kansas and focuses on studying the revitalization of cultural burns, especially small area. Well, cultural burning, just for everyone to know here, are, as she says, small area prescribed fires conducted using traditional ecological knowledge. So it's really putting that traditional knowledge to practice in our current terms, and collaborates with tribal nations in Northern California. She also examines plant and soil physical chemical responses to cultural fire, including culturally significant plant yields, soil carbon storage, nutrient cycling, and water holding capacity. She says her work is rooted in the place-specific land stewardship lessons of Indigenous cultural fire practitioner partners. Finally, the broader implication of this research could include deploying cultural fire as a climate adaptation strategy while mitigating the frequency and intensity of catastrophic wildfire in the West. And just to bring this back to the personal note, in her talk this past fall at our convening, the Climate and Wildfire Institute, she talked about really how supporting Indigenous application and rights to use fire is really connected with the land back movement as a liberation framework of returning cultural practices and rights to steward to Indigenous nations throughout the US and the world. So again, thank you, Dr. Adams, for being here. And I'd like to then move into another amazing speaker we have tonight, Dr. Colleen Rossier. Colleen, am I saying your last name right? I should check really quick.
You're saying it more beautifully than it actually is pronounced. It's Rozier, but you can say Rossier. You can say it
Okay.
however you want.
We'll go by Dr. Colleen for the night. That's all right. And Colleen is the Senior Research and Policy Advisor at the Karuk Tribe's Department of Natural Resources. While she has the great honor of working for the Karuk tribe, she's not Indigenous herself and originally comes from the Northern Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. An ecologist by training, she works at the interface of practice, research, and perspective and policy to support Indigenous leadership and integrate Indigenous and Western sciences and perspectives into actionable change for a better world. Currently, her work focuses on fire, forest, and land management policy at tribal, state, and federal levels. She is a co-author of the Karuk's Tribe recently released Good Fire 2 report, which lays out barriers to and recommendations for the expansion of beneficial fire at both the state and federal levels. And just for everyone here, if you haven't read the Good Fire 1 or 2 report, really phenomenal reports that not only connect folks with the concept of cultural burning, but what are the actual political and cultural barriers that we can work towards undoing to support fire sovereignty here throughout the US. Finally, she started doing prescribed burning in 2012 and burns a few weeks a year, trying to keep her work grounded and loves to getting to put good fire on the ground. Colleen was also at our convening this past year, and it was just so wonderful to have with both her perspectives and her vigor into supporting fire in the land back movement. So thank you for being here, Colleen. Next up, amazing Kelly Martin. Kelly Martin is a retired federal wildland firefighter with over 35 years of federal wildland fire experience. She retired as a chief of fire and aviation at Yosemite National Park in 2019 after serving 14 years there as the first female fire chief in the park's history. She worked her way up through the wildland fire ranks, holding positions with the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service in 6 different states, and becoming highly skilled and qualified in operations and fire behavior on Type 1 and Type 2 incident management teams. In 2019, Martin retired from the federal service to become the co-founder and president of Grassroots Wildland Firefighters, which again are generous enough to have us use their account tonight and be in coalition with us. Kelly's current work includes vice president of the International Association of Wildland Fire, serving on the board of directors since 2019. She was a representative for wildland firefighters on the Biden-Harris Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission. If folks haven't gotten a chance to read that report or listen to any podcasts on it at this point, truly an amazing compilation that talks about how fire is both the solution and the issue that we're trying to address. So with fire as both a solution and a challenge, how can we move forward and consider public health and the needs of firefighters while understanding that development has occurred here in the United States and wildfire is becoming a crisis. So Kelly finally serves as a coach, mentor, trainer for Women in Fire Training Exchange since 2016, and most recently completed her first international W-Trax training in South Africa. Kelly is truly an incredible mentor and leader in the field, and with her background in fire and now her work with Riva and Ben in both founding and supporting Grassroots, just doing amazing advocacy work to try to actually develop the principle of care when we're thinking about how do we take care of wildland firefighters and people affected by fire. So thank you for being here, Kelly. I'm going to introduce one other person and then pass on several more introductions to my colleagues here. Now I should make sure names again. Naomi, is it Naomi or Naomi?
It's Naomi. but people say it
Naomi,
both
thank
ways. But Naomi.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Well, Naomi was recommended to us from another friend of Chris's, and we're so excited to have her here tonight. Naomi started working for the Forest Service in 2008 and started working in fire in 2009. She worked on district engine crews on the Idaho Panhandle Hotshots, and most recently with the Missoula Smoke Jumpers from 2015 to 2020. Currently, Naomi is working as a fire program manager for Forest Service International programs, assisting developing fire management programs in South America. So the Forest Service IP international programs really doing amazing work to try to train more people around the world, not only in fire suppression, but also in fire implementation. So really excited to hear Naomi tonight talk about her experiences with international programs. And finally, she lives in Missoula with her husband and 2 daughters, 2 years old and 4 months old. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Naomi. So excited to hear what you have to say. And I'd like to pass on the introductions to Ben to please introduce Rebecca Roller.
Yeah, happy to. So Rebecca Roller is originally from Colorado and is currently working in Central Oregon. She started working for a contract engine, then worked for the Forest Service in Colorado for 4 seasons. She then detailed with the Redmond Hotshots for a season before taking a lead position with the Redmond Hotshots for another 2 seasons, and is now entering her 9th season in fire as a lead on a wildland fire use module in Bend, Oregon. Throughout her career, she has helped with the Job Corps program and apprenticeship program. Her main passion in fire is mentoring and helping people. People are the most difficult and most fascinating part of fire, and that is the reason she keeps coming back. Rebecca is an outstanding firefighter, a fully qualified crew boss, and one of my close friends who I'm very excited to have on this panel tonight. And then I'll be passing it to Lily. Emily.
Hi, yeah, I'm excited to introduce Susan Farrington tonight. Susan is someone who entered the natural resource career field relatively late in life, and having earned a history degree originally, she returned to get her master's degree in forest ecology. And she's been a natural history biologist with the Missouri Department of Conservation for over 13 years, following 4 years as a plant ecologist. And her work to restore natural communities has led her to become very involved in prescribed fire. And she's an MDC burn boss and wildfire incident commander. She's led many AmeriCorps teams on prescribed fires and wildfires, and she and her husband conduct a number of prescribed burns on their personal property to restore its glades and woodlands. And I'm personally excited to introduce her because she's someone who's taught me a lot, from identifying all the trees with opposite branching in Missouri to guiding me on my first 2 wildfires. So yeah, happy to have her tonight.
Thanks, Emily.
Amazing. Thank you all. Well, Chris is going to start us off, and panelists, please know that this is really a conversation format. Thinking that no need to raise hands and such. This is both whoever is inspired to answer the question is welcome to, and if you would like to respond to something your fellow panelists have said or talk about it a little bit more, please feel free to. Chris, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, and just panel members, please, feel free to contribute. And if there's a particular question that you don't feel inspired to answer, then don't worry about it. And yeah, we should get a good mix of responses from different folks. I'm excited this year because of the wide variety of backgrounds from everyone. So our first question for our panel members is a general one that helps us build the foundation for the rest of the questions. But we're interested, what drove you or inspired you to enter the world of wildland fire?
I always hate to go first, but I can kick it off if you'd like. I know. Thanks, Chris.
Sure.
I just really want to thank everybody that showed up tonight. These are really, I love it when there's opportunities for us to have really meaningful dialogues within wildland fire, and Ben McLean and Lily and Chris and others. I'm sorry I haven't been part of the culture committees for as long as you guys have really been putting that together, but it's a really brilliant effort by all of your parts, and congratulations to doing the Women in Wildfire panel. You know, when I first looked at this question, I thought to myself, so here's another trivia. Let's see if anybody's older than me. So, anybody else in their 60s? So like, I remember, okay, I got one, Susan. Okay. When I was in high school, I don't remember when Title IX finally came to, you know, allowing more funding for women's sports. And I just loved track and field and being outdoors. And I was not a very good studious person in high school. And so I had a really rough time, you know, getting through high school. And so when I got out of high school into college, I found Wildland Fire to be really what I really so that really, I think, inspired me to know that I think there's got a microphone on.
Sorry, Kelly, we're kind of having you washed out. Can everyone please make sure to mute if they're not the current speaker? Thank you. Kelly, could you start a little bit back after track?
Yeah, I think the fact that, you know, high school sports for me was physical, it was outdoors, it was hard, it was a team, I had great coaches. And so it just, that to me was like really in alignment with Wildland Fire. It's a team, it's outdoors, you have to work hard. There's a tremendous amount of respect. There's challenges, there's wins, there's losses. And so it fit really good for me to say, this is something that I really wanted to do. And I'm so glad that I persisted through the ups and downs, because honestly, I couldn't have imagined, you know, doing anything else. So that's really what got me involved in, you know, it was the physical aspect and the camaraderie, the travel, the excitement was just really, really fit really well with what I was most interested in life.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Would anyone else like to jump in?
I'll follow up on that. I think some of those reasons that Kelly brought up aren't necessarily why I got into fire, but more why I stayed. Once you get in it and you start building that camaraderie and you feel like you're part of a team and kind of build that family aspect, it keeps you coming back year after year. But I'd say initially what brought me in, and I think across the board with a lot of coworkers I've had, this kind of rings true for more than people than just me, is we kind of got into it just as a summer job to pay for school. It was never a career choice for me. I was going to school to be a teacher, but I grew up in North Idaho, rural, small town, lots of people work for the Forest Service, so it was just available to me and it was familiar and it was a great way to spend the summer. And so that's how I got involved. And then now it's, you know, 20 years later, I'm still in it. So, well, not quite that long, 16 years later. But I think, yeah, why I've stayed in is that it was so much more than just a summer job eventually. And then also on NPR this morning, I heard kind of a little blurb on a new podcast that's coming up about the science of siblings and how your siblings affect the choices you make in your life. And I grew up with two older brothers who were pretty rough on me. And I think honestly that also set me up for success in fire. And I kind of got to have, you know, on the hotshot crew, like 18 older brothers. So that's another reason why I stuck around. It felt familiar to me. Also, I'd like to say that I'm very humbled to be on this, or honored to be on this panel. There's a lot of great experience and amazing backgrounds here. So thanks for including me.
I'll follow up and say I feel like very humbled and like I don't fit in on this panel. So, because I've never fought wildfire out west or any of that. I'm certainly not a hot shot. I got into fire for very different reasons than the rest of you. Well, not maybe all of you, but some of you. And that my interest came from the restoration point of view, that I got into fire so that I could restore natural communities. And the first burn I probably ever helped with was just a friend. My husband and I went and helped a friend burn his prairie. And then eventually I got on with MDC, and I did a little bit of burning when I worked as a plant ecologist, but just a little. My main burning has come since I became a natural history biologist. And for me, it's watching the work, watching what happens in restoration that inspired me to get into fire. And my husband and I, as they said in the introductions, we do a lot of prescribed burn on our own properties to restore our glades, woodlands, even wetlands, fens benefit from fire, not on our personal property, but on MDC. I've helped burn fens and prairies as well. But I'm trying to think, I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, it's getting late at night for me. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Oh, if I may, just I'm feeling some resonance here. So I too am grateful to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the hard work of the organizers for this panel. And it's wonderful to see so many people that I met most recently at the Climate and Wildfire Institute conveying. So it's wonderful to see you all again. So I'm Melinda. I just earned my PhD, or going almost on a year now. Actually 3 months out from it, but nonetheless. And part of my work was studying cultural fire. And by study, I mean being in relationship to the cultural fire practitioners that I'm grateful to learn from, being drawn to this work as an Indigenous person. So the restoration, Susan, just, knowing how beneficial of a tool fire is, a different perspective of looking at it from a majority of people. But before that, as an Indigenous person, for one, a lot of my family members, like what Naomi and I think Kelly shared, like I grew up with people that were in wildland firefighting for summer jobs. My mother was a wildland firefighter. I don't share that very often, but when I was telling her I'm doing cultural fire in the West, she's like, "Oh yeah, I was a firefighter." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool, Mom." So it's very much like, as Native people, just being on the reservation and having job opportunities in wildland firefighting, like it's always been respected in my family. And then as an Indigenous person, learning about cultural fire from my own heritage and my background and what my tribe does. In Arizona, I'm San Carlos Apache. Many people have fought fire with White Mountain Apache, hot shots, so cousins to my tribe. Learning about it in the West from California Indian tribes and how we view fire, in a different way, in a spiritual way, in a cultural way, knowing that our peoples burned these landscapes and took care of these waterscapes since time immemorial. Learning that really made me feel at home out in the West while I was doing this PhD. So I was able to convince people to let me study and learn from cultural fire practitioners their way, rooted in my way, and to turn it into a PhD. So now I have a PhD and I have my own fire lab. I'm in the Midwest now, where I get to learn about the culture of fire that is different here in the Midwest, but those cultural connections as Indigenous peoples is what I live for, but also stewarding fire side by side with wildland firefighters, hotshots that come out to learn about cultural burning. And it's really inspiring, and I don't have better partners than those that are in wildland fire in trying to get more good fire onto the ground. So yeah, gratitude, Sean, thank you for having us, and I look forward to more conversation.
Awesome. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here because my path into fire was very different. I didn't know anything about fighting fire. I didn't know anybody in the Forest Service. I didn't know anyone in the BLM. But when I was in high school, I joined a volunteer fire department. And so when I turned 18, they put me through 130, 190. And I remember being a senior in high school, like, what am I supposed to do next? And I was like, I want to fight fire. So I did what any good high school student should do, and I went to college and got a math degree. That hasn't really helped me a whole lot, but it landed me an insurance job, which led to a quarter life crisis because that's not what I was supposed to be doing. I remember sitting there and there was smoke in the air, and I'm in my air conditioned office, and all I wanted to do was get out and go fight fire. So that's what I did, and this is always what I wanted to do. And I finally just made the jump, and I can't believe that I'm where I'm at today, and I'm so happy to be where I'm at today. And then I look around at the rest of this panel, and I'm absolutely humbled to be asked to be a part of this with so many other wonderful women. And yeah, so I didn't stumble into this. It wasn't a college job for me. It was something that I always wanted to do, and here I am doing it.
Rebecca, you just reminded me that back in my 20s, I also was a volunteer firefighter. One day I was sitting with a friend at a cafe or something, and a fire engine went roaring by, and I looked at her and I said, I always wanted to be a firefighter. And she said, well, then why aren't you? I was like, So I went down to the local volunteer fire station and said, what does it take to become a volunteer firefighter? And they said, sign up. So I did that for a couple of years as in my 20s before I got into conservation.
I'd also love to jump in here. Can everybody hear me all right? Also, big thank you to everyone putting this on today. And it's such an honor to be a part of this. And also, I'm like, me? I'm in wildfire? Because my path was, I would say, non-traditional, though it sounds like we've all had our own kind of unique paths. As someone who grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., it was like nobody worked for the Forest Service unless they were kind of like in suits in kind of government buildings. And so I grew up definitely immersed in policy and like the desire, seeing a lot of big problems and challenges and, climate change and pollution and kind of food systems that don't make full sense, and just really kind of struggling with understanding, how to address a lot of these big challenges. And I kind of worked my way through. I was always really interested in human health and environmental health, and I was always trying to kind of bridge those connections and look at things more holistically. And that just kept leading me to tribes and indigenous peoples, and just the brilliance and the sophistication of those systems. And so I went and worked for the U.S. Department of Ag after college, and wanted to kind of shift some of our food system policies at that time. But I kept coming back to I need to support indigenous peoples and their leadership in this, because those are the people who know how to do this in a good way. And so I basically kind of flung myself out to Northern California and the Karuk tribe in 2013. And my orientation was like food and medicine and land management. And that led me to fire, because fire is the tool that indigenous people use to manage these things. I mean, among other tools, but that's the big one. And that's the big one that has a lot of policy barriers in the way through, all the fire suppression, exclusion policies, assimilation policies, genocide, etc. So I kind of ended up backing into it. But I'm so honored to be here, and I love, getting to learn like burning on the ground too. And so that's been like a very big teacher for me, but the biggest teacher has been the cultural fire practitioners, indigenous folks that I have the honor of getting to work with and for.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, that was a really great way to build a base for this discussion, I think. And I just wanted to comment, I think one of the biggest strengths of our panel this year is that we don't just have a bunch of stinky hotshots, right? We have a variety of people in all parts of the fire realm. And so please, nobody feel like an imposter for being a part of this. It's only a strength. So for those of us who are on the fire management, the hotshot side, we definitely look over on the other side and have a lot of admiration. So thanks for that. And with that, I'll transition to Lily with the next question.
Yeah, thank you all again for your thoughtful responses to that. Next question, and again, remember, whoever would like to listen, if you feel like you haven't gotten a chance to really talk, you go ahead and raise your hand, but otherwise just make it conversational and jump in when it makes sense. Okay, can you remember a pivotal moment or a transitional time when you decided to stay with fire in your professional capacity or shifted your career path within the wildfire world? What would you tell yourself during that time now that you are where you are?
Well, someone's got to go first. I'll jump in. Yeah, I think for me, like I said, I kind of started it as a transitional job to get me through college and then was hotshotting for a few years after college. But I came to this point where I felt like I was done with the hotshot life and I wanted to do something else. And so I was going to leave the Forest Service. I was going to go teach internationally. And the program I was supposed to do kind of fell through last minute. And during that same kind of time period, I started dating my now husband, and he was jumping at the time. And so it was just kind of those two things happening at the same time. And then me getting interested in the smoke jumper program, I was like, all right, I guess I'll give this a shot because it sounds fun, like a great challenge. So I felt like I was so close. I was like on this tightrope, like of jumping off into a different world and taking a different path. And I decided to go into jumping. And then that's really where I, finally got a perm after, 7, 8 years of being a temporary, and decided to make it a career. So, yeah, it was just, luck of the draw. Who knows what could happen if that program had stayed, hadn't fallen through in the last minute. But looking back, I think it was the right thing for me, and I'm really grateful for that experience jumping. And then another transitional time, and I think this is a really hot, big topic for a lot of women in fire, was when I left jumping to work for international programs, was because we decided we wanted to have kids. And so I think there's kind of there's two camps, there's the one camp that says women can have both, and then there's the other camp that says maybe not, and we're trying to figure out how do we bridge that gap? How do we have both, or can we? And at the time I said, I'm just gonna take a detail with international programs, and I would like to go back and jump after I have a kid. We'll balance, we'll switch off, we'll take turns. And then I don't know how many mothers we have on this panel, but once I had that baby, I said, no, like there's no way that I'm going to be gone that much. At least when she's this little. And so my perception really changed. And now, well, I'm still currently detailed, but hopefully permanently with international programs soon. So that was a big change for me, going from operational firefighter into this new role where I'm still doing fire, but in a very different capacity. And it was really hard for me mentally to make that shift. And I probably never would have done it had I not had kids. So those were just kind of two, I guess, important moments for me along the way.
I think that Naomi brings up a good point that, things change in your life. And so what wasn't the most important thing to you 5 years ago might not be the most important thing now. And that's okay. And so as you're working your way through your career, and I think I am currently in that place where, I put my entire life into my job, and I loved what I did, and I still love what I do, but I'm trying to find identity outside of fire now, because so much of my identity has been wrapped up in my career choice, and I have loved it, but now I'm trying to find room for other things in my life as well, and trying to balance that. So what was important to me 5 years ago is different than what is important to me now. And I think that, you know, we're always in some sort of transition period. You know, you have a goal, you reach your goal, and what's next, and trying to balance that with what your values are, and knowing that your values do change, and staying true to that is incredibly important. And whatever you do and however you choose to move forward in your path, making sure that it feels right to you, because if it doesn't, then you're not going to be happy, and moving forward isn't going to be what works.
I feel similarly, that kind of like feeling out my way, and I'm still definitely in that process. But as far, I mean, I think there have been several kind of pivotal moments. I would say the most recent one kind of came as an opportunity with my boss, Bill Tripp, getting the appointment to be on the commission with Kelly and others. And I was managing really more like a research, workforce development, and environmental education program for the Department of Natural Resources at the time. And some of the research stuff touched on policy, but, you know, I was always like hearing just, you know, the frustrations of a lot of the policy frameworks that were restrictive to fire use, cultural and prescribed fire use, use within the wildland fire context. And so I saw him kind of stepping into that space, and I asked him if he needed, you know, some support in that process. And that ended up kind of becoming my new job. And then it just seems like there is such excitement around that commission report and the recommendations in it, and, you know, at congressional level, at the state of California level, and in different ways. But it's just been a really awesome opportunity to kind of get swept up in that tide, and be able to really jump in and feel like there's opportunity to do some really meaningful work, and like right now. So that was a really cool, just fortuitous timing, I would say. And I definitely feel fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, Colleen, thank you. I like the idea of the pivoting and kind of shifting gears and the momentum, I think, within the fire world, like this attention on fire, not just wildfire seasons and an El Nino season, but also the commissioner's report and the Good Fire 2 report that has tangible solutions and that just need to be codified, right? So I appreciate you articulating that the way that you did. So the work I do right now, I might not have mentioned, but I myself am a practitioner. I am a practitioner, and I lead cultural fires now, from what my family has taught me, like up until university level. I've done prairie burns in the Midwest kind of before finding my way into to learning with Native California Indian practitioners in the West. So I study fire, but I also plan the fires and the cultural burn demonstrations that we do here in the Midwest now. And with the momentum, I think just around the world, with Indigenous peoples reclaiming those land stewardship practices, because these aren't practices that were just specifically done in the Western United States. Lots of different tribes and lots of different Indigenous peoples from around the world, for millennia, you know, stewarded homelands in this way. So it's really empowering to see Indigenous peoples learning from one another and trying to get fire on the ground as a wildfire mitigation technique, but also to reclaim lifeways and medicines and restore water tables. So it's a really pivotal moment right now for Indigenous cultural fire practitioners. And then with us, something that Colleen said earlier about the role of colonization and the role of wildland fire suppression and what it's done to a lot of our spaces and a lot of our lands. They don't look like how they used to look when things were plentiful. So now having those policy, those assembly bills and Senate bills in place where we could have more success in returning fire in a responsible way, in a culturally rooted way, I think it's a moment right now. So that's encouraging. So the pivoting moment for me was returning cultural fire for sure. But then I like to think of it as like learning the culture of fire in the West, very, living in the seasons of gigafire and how that's directly affecting people with our health, our mental health, having to evacuate, being around, the kind of negative connotations that is wildfire. And now I've made the decision to be back home with my family, who are in Kansas, and learning a different culture of fire, like learning that people burn regularly out here. They have very regimented burn intervals, but reawakening Indigenous peoples' fire stewarding role here at this place that I am now, like it's inspiring, and they know that history is in their lineage. It's just the effects of colonization has removed or erased or has made us lose that touch. So what I try to do is to make time and space and having us as a people reclaim and relearn those things on our terms. And the landscape looks different because of mismanagement or lack of management. Fire's been absent from a lot of places here in the Midwest too. So really being a person or a facilitator to welcome fire back, where we start with ceremony, where we have languages that flow, that return to the places that they belong to and the people they belong to. That for me has, I was on the other end of that in California, learning and being like the younger sibling, and now I have this role in this PhD, and now I'm teaching younger students to do that. And I know, like, even prescribed burning and being in WCG certified, like being on burns, I know it's gonna wear on my body soon. So being able to train and inspire younger generations of Indigenous peoples reclaiming these fire stewardship techniques, I think has been a pivot for me, like within the past year. So I'm trying to get comfortable and being on this side of things as more of a person that's demonstrating these lessons and the culture that is very much a part of fire and fire reclamation.
I wanted to address something you're saying there, Melinda, that, it really resonated with me, that the lack of management over so many years, our fire suppression, fire's bad, Smokey Bear tells you to put it all out. And even though we've come a long way in using fire as a restorative tool, we still constantly run into people who are saying, well, yeah, but natural fires, really didn't occur in Missouri much. We don't have lightning fires here. And I'm like, we've had Native Americans burning here for, 10,000, 12,000 years. And that wasn't considered natural. It is natural. That is part of what has happened for so long. And we deny that background when we say that only so-called natural fires should be allowed. So the fire management by Indigenous people was hugely important and shaped Missouri in a way that most people don't think of. And even back east, eastern areas, Northeast is just becoming more aware of its fire background, that fire does exist back there too, not in the same way. Every state and every region has sort of a different relationship with fire, but there's hardly any part of the United States that didn't have some kind of historical management with fire.
Well, thank you all so much for those incredibly thoughtful responses. And Kelly, for your comments in the chat. I love what you said of remaking ourselves every 5 to 7 years. That's really wonderful. And for Colleen, Susan, and Melinda talking so much about how, yeah, really it's I mean, Indigenous people have already known this, of course, and it really was a self-discovery that our wildfire problem is really the colonization problem. And just so grateful for you all for trying to return and revitalize the knowledge that is still there around fire and our relationship to it in our landscapes. So thank you for those responses. And Chris, please go ahead and ask the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Lily. So our next question gets into more of the people that are around, that have been around during your journey in the fire world. Can you describe a personal and professional relationship with a particularly inspiring individual that encouraged you to transition out of a professional role or choose to stay in one?
I can start. I've probably gotta make another shout out to Bill Tripp. So as I don't know, probably some of you know, tribal governments are generally asked to do a lot more than they have the financial resources to do. So people generally have like a lot of jobs and a lot of hats. And I learned that the hard way. I didn't really know that going in. I'd worked at some different jobs before, but I kind of described it as it was like, it's like we're government with the full kind of bureaucracy of a government, but running on like nonprofit funding. So constantly kind of fundraising and grant fundraising. And so I was doing this job that was just like, I was just at the end of my rope. And I started having conversations with him, and he was my boss at the time, still is, about how, how to do this. I don't want to let these programs fall apart, but how do we kind of sustain them and also like sustain myself and not just, quit and kind of leave in a flaming mess what was there before, because I really believed in the work. And so, he basically said to me, well, like, what do you think? What's the answer? And I was like, boss, man, I was kind of hoping you could tell me that. But after we would kind of go back a couple of weeks back and forth in August of 2022, I think. And essentially we ended up splitting that job into 4 jobs. And then we ended up finding like just the best Karuk people to fill the other roles. And like they're way better at those jobs than I was, and those jobs are better scoped. I mean, they're still like, just more than anyone should really be doing, but that's just because there's so much amazing work to be done. But I really appreciated his ability to hear where I was and to work constructively. And that allowed, the progression for me to then really focus more on the policy space, which is definitely more of like my interest and also kind of where I come from, coming from the DC area. And I think there's still a lot of room for a lot of people. And I certainly, as a non-Indigenous person working for the tribe, I'm constantly like, am I still like, should I still be in this space? Is it really appropriate for, and so there may very well come a time soon, I don't know, when it's not, and so that's a constant part that I do want to mention, because I think it is really important to constantly be evaluating that and what roles, we're playing, and the people we are, who we bring to each moment. And that's just an ever-present kind of lens. Part of who I am or what I should be bringing to any space. But I really appreciated his kind of constructive, collaborative work with me. And it's an ongoing conversation of, what is the appropriate role for me in this space, and how can I be supporting of the work that is happening through us all. So
Oh, that was amazing, Colleen. I would say yes, we need you to keep doing what you're doing, especially with policy. You know, these fire suppression policies, especially in the West, continue to be barriers in getting any kind, like any prescribed cultural agency. I mean, you're on the line too. It's really tough to try to be in the in the world of putting fire on the ground, coincidentally enough. But yeah, so for those interested in culture fire, or just kind of the lens that I hope and that Colleen is bringing, but just the role of allyship, you know, being a voice along with us, because these do go beyond maybe taking good care of homelands. These are what I said earlier, like returning lifeways that were stolen. You know, we could say we lost them, but we didn't lose them. They were taken from us. And we're seeing the results of that, the consequences of that. So I do want to just also acknowledge that Karuk tribal members and Yurok tribal members have been leaders in this space and returning cultural fire on their terms. But that's not to say it's been a smooth path for them, and it's been all successes. You know, I do want to acknowledge that took decades of grassroots efforts. But some of the beautiful stories and land return that you're seeing in California, and the dams are coming down. Senate bills and Assembly bills are being codified into law now, and Hupa and Yurok have been leaders in that space. So we mentioned Bill Tripp, definitely a person you know, that I learned from and consider, you know, one of the leaders in this space. Also Margot Robbins from the Yurok tribe, Elizabeth Jesus, and they are part of the Cultural Fire Management Council that we all are learning from and are grateful that they are sharing cultural stories and land stewardship lessons of the good work that they're doing. It's, you know, reverberated in a lot of places within California, and I point to it with practitioners here in the Midwest. So it's, I said fire coalitions earlier, but yeah, really learning from the leaders in this space whom also, you know, I consider those that were already shared. But yeah, mentorship. So I do want to think something that Lily and I were talking about, and maybe even Kelly, like at CWI, was the role of women in wildland firefighting. And what I try to elevate is the role of Indigenous women reclaiming cultural fire. Because for a while there, with a lot of news pieces that were being written, a lot of attention was paid to Native men that were reclaiming these practices. That's not to say that we're trying to imbalance that or decentralize the voices of these Native men leaders, but historically and culturally, a lot of our tribes and societies were led by women. And if I'm correct, Karuk have tribal stories of women leading with fire, different ways of burning. So for us, before colonization, I'm not trying to make anybody uncomfortable, but that just this is history, you know, it brought a gendered lens into our landscapes, into our societies, because before white male domination, Native women led the decision making. We belong to matriarchal societies. So what I try to do is elevate the Native women cultural fire practitioners that I work with in the Delta region of California, because it is a return when we lead in that way, and a lot of the directives that come down from Native women, you know, and I think there's just space for that in wildland firefighting. We think about the 10 to 20% of the 10 to 20% of women that's represented in wildland firefighter leadership. You know, it's reflected in, well, Native women led, and so trying to uplift that message and to resonate with women in wildland firefighter, that we're seeing the same perspective of wildfire, and it's felt in that way. Yeah, so thank you for those comments, Colleen. I really appreciate that.
Does anyone else have any additions to that? Cool. All right, we'll transition to Lily with our next question.
Great, thank you, and thank you for those really incredible responses. Our next question is, what are your goals in relation to fire, whether professional or as a personal mission?
I can start this one off because I have things that are very personal with my mission in fire and my goals in fire. And really what I hope to bring to the wildland fire community is impacting the mental health and the culture of the wildland fire community. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. When I get the chance to lead, I just was a crew boss for a Job Corps module out in Virginia, and having the opportunity to lead and show people that what has always been does not have to be the way it always has to be. You know, it was commented numerous times how nice I was and how caring I was, but when we were blowing hotline around homes to save people's homes, I was still able to get my point across and get the support of people while also maintaining a culture where I care about them and I am concerned about their well-being and how they are doing. And so, you know, even if it's just impacting the people that I'm working directly with and influencing that to move outwards, I think that, you know, we do highly impact and influence the people around us. And there's a lot of things in the fire culture that's just the way it's been. And that's just the way it's supposed to be. And I challenge that because I care a lot. I find a lot of value in myself by helping other people. So it's a role that comes naturally to me to support the people that are around me and to show, you know, new firefighter ones when I get the opportunity. Something that was written in my firefighter one task book when I got signed off on my firefighter one by a female firefighter was make sure you're taking care of your people, because that's incredibly important. And that is something that has stuck with me. And I hope that I have amplified and moved out. You know, I had somebody on this assignment. He was a great firefighter one, but that human touch needed some help. And I had numerous conversations with him about that. And as he's transitioning into a leadership role, to make sure that you have that soft touch and you don't lose sight of the fact that we are all human beings. And like I said in my intro, I think that humans are the most challenging part of this job, but they're also the most fascinating part of this job. And it's important that we take care of each other because we spend so much time together. The job is hard enough as it is, so we have to take care of each other. And I have found myself being the crew therapist on more than one occasion, and I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that people can trust me and come to me and we can talk about what's happening at home. Why are you frustrated with that? What's happening here? Where is that coming from? And so just trying to influence the culture is incredibly important to me. And I think that it's surprising to me how much positive feedback I get in that arena, because it's, for some people, it's so different. They've never had a leader or somebody that they've fought fire with ask how they're doing. How is everything at home? You know, are you talking to your girlfriend, your boyfriend? How are your dogs? How are your kids? And I think that the culture of fire doesn't necessarily allow a lot of room for that. And I really try to open the door because at the end of the day, we're all humans and we should really be taking care of each other.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, and I just wanted to add on a little bit about kind of the experience I've had working with women in South America. So the countries that I'm working with primarily right now are Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. And, you know, we have a shortage of women in wildland fire and kind of a culture, a very male-dominated culture here in the US, and it's even more so in Latin America. So women are operationally probably less than 5% on fires in the countries that I've worked in. So what we've been doing with our program is trying to always make sure that there are women represented in our our courses. We're inviting women from agencies that are, at different levels in their career, but have promise of continuing on within fire. And then we try to support them along the journey and keep inviting them to courses and checking in with them. And something that we have seen is that, the men that we work with are amazing, and they're very happy to be in our courses, and they're hungry for this material that we're giving them, because fire is, getting worse and worse in these countries, and historically it never was there. And so they need support, and they're happy, to be in our courses. But the women we've had in our courses are just above and beyond in their involvement in the activities, in their passion for what we're doing, and in their interest in continuing in this field, even though in a lot of instances they don't have a lot of support from their supervisors, from their community, from their culture as a whole. And so it's really inspiring to see. And this last January we did an L280 leadership course. So that's like our intermediate leadership course for firefighters, and we did it for all women from 8 different countries, and we brought them together in Lima. And unfortunately I wasn't able to go. I was on maternity leave at the time, but the whole cadre just left that class like walking on air. They said like they had never participated in a class like this. The energy was incredible. The support between the students was something they'd never seen before. The conversations, the things that opened up when they were allowed that safe space of having the ability to talk about their experiences and share and see other women in that position was really powerful. And so I think we're going to continue trying to do that every year, is have a class of all women. And then we're also going to try to open spaces like this where we bring together that same network and keep connecting them, even if it's just virtually, however we can, so that hopefully we can help a little bit with that retention of the few women that are still in fire and that are fighting the fight. And then hopefully they'll bring in more. So yeah, we have a long ways to go here nationally to get more women involved and supported, but also internationally, just the need is always there. But I think women, and I don't know if I really realized this when I first got into fire, I wanted to be one of the guys. I think a lot of us felt that way when we first got in. You want to be accepted, you want to be tough, you want to be seen, you don't want to be seen as different. But now I think like we do have different things to bring to the table. And like Rebecca said, maybe that's someone that people are more comfortable opening up to and talking to on the crew. And I think we need to honor those differences and recognize that they're there, and they can really benefit the field. So it's just been really inspiring and eye-opening for me to work, to have the opportunity to like lead these more women-focused activities that I never was able to do before. And now in South America, I've been able to start doing. So it's been really interesting. And also kind of off topic, but with the cultural fire thing, Melinda, I might be getting a hold of you and Colleen too in the future, because something that we've struggled with in South America is that they've also lost their cultural practices of fire in a lot of ways. And a lot of countries prohibit the use of fire in any way. So it's really stunted their ability to maintain those cultural practices. And as an outside agency and outside government, we can't come in and tell them, you can burn. But we're hoping eventually, if those policies do change nationally, we can go in and start helping restore those practices. So yeah, I'm hoping at some point I'll be able to reach out to you guys for some direction.
Absolutely. I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying on the policy change front, because that's definitely where my head is at right now, at least kind of professional mission wise, but personal mission as well, is really seeing some significant change in the policy arena, and shifting it from being largely restrictive and top down to really supportive and kind of getting out of the way of Indigenous fire management systems, including cultural burning, including prescribed fire, recognition that cultural fire falls within tribal sovereign authority and is not something that should require any approvals from any federal or state bodies, but is something that is an inherent right of Indigenous people. And would just really like to see, a kind of restructuring of the way a lot of land management decisions are made, and to see tribal leadership recognized and supported in those spaces, and would love to be a part of supporting that. So.
I will say the same too. I've been connecting just ad hocly with Indigenous women in Central America, Latin America, that are reclaiming some fire stewardship lessons, but the nation state is also difficult to navigate, especially as women in those spaces. And so we're having these just unofficial meetings and trying to share lessons. I also took a trip internationally to Canada and learn what Indigenous cultural fire practitioners are doing in that area of the world. It mirrors very much the opportunities and barriers here in the United States. And so, yeah, it's a fascinating conversation to share strategy and to uplift the voices of women in wildland firefighting as an extension and allyship with Indigenous women reclaiming cultural fire. So it's a growing space to be in, and one that people are thinking about on the ground too. So Naomi and Colleen, I'd love to keep up with you all beyond this conversation. Yeah, and in terms of professional goals, I think you all can guess, like, yes, empowering other Native people from all parts of what we consider the United States, and knowing that we have fire in our cultural life ways, it sustained our cultural values and our cultural ways. So connecting with my peoples, not just, like I said, for restoration purposes, but to heal ourselves, you know, to reclaim some of those parts of our histories and our lineages that were taken away from us, and the violence that our women endured, you know, coupled with colonization. So a lot of that people are interested in, but for me, that's a priority, you know, healing my communities and healing the landscapes that we call home. And then building allyship, like I said, people within agencies, especially in California, we invoked specific assembly bills and Senate bills that the leaders in Karuk and Hoopa and Yurok laid the ground for. So I was able to enact these policy changes and be considered a cultural burn practitioner, which had the same certification as a state burn boss. So we got to see those policies and undo a little bit of what colonization has done and lead fire in that way. So just keeping up with the policy that's slowly leveraging power back to Indigenous fire practitioners is a goal for me. So to stay in that space and to honor those relationships that I've spent, you know, a good part of grad school in my personal life, you know, they're important. And for Indigenous peoples, always returning and checking ourselves, you know, myself as an ally, not a California native, but a person working with our peoples, you know, doing my best to hold myself accountable and like constantly questioning myself and my intent and making sure it's coming from a good, I do that too, y'all. So so really trying to do research and trying to learn with and for peoples in a good way. But yeah, building allyship with our fire professionals who I have the utmost respect for. And I think we all have the same goal of more good fire on the ground is going to mitigate against large scale catastrophic wildfire. So those would be my goals. And yeah, just a shout out for continued connections for anybody on the panel. I'd appreciate that. Yeah.
Lilia, do you have your hand up? Did you want to go?
I just have to say I really love these conversations, and you know, I was kind of tracking with Naomi, and then got really intrigued by Melinda. So I think between the two of them, there's some really cool things that are happening, you know, both for men and women, you know, by really helping empower both Indigenous cultures, tribal cultures, not just within the United States, but worldwide. So there's a really significant, you know, hunger for this, and for men to bring more women, you know, and I don't want to say allow them in, but to regain their rightful place using fire worldwide. So, you know, just a quick sidebar, when we were doing women in fire training exchanges, WTREX in 2016 was our first one in Hayfork. It was a concept of kind of flipping the the 90-10 on its head. You know, we work in a profession which it's 90% men and 10% women. And so we purposely said, oh, we're going to select for, you know, 90% women and 10% men. And what the reason we did that is we really wanted to create this space where we could help build, you know, and encourage confidence and competence in women. That some of the stories and some of our own personal stories, you know, really drove this, that, you know, when we can come together as you know, humanity, certainly women, and really help them know that they're not alone. That was kind of our goal initially. And since then we, you know, we're probably 9 years into it now, and expanding to, you know, South Africa and Portugal just recently, you know, where, you know, Portugal had to shut down their application period because they had over 250 applicants and we could only take 40. So I think all of you on this panel, as well as that are listening here tonight, just know that this is really a significant, it feels like a significant moment in history that we are honoring women in this space, and especially, you know, women that have been oppressed due to colonization worldwide. And so for me, that's a really high calling. It's something I'm trying to understand more, that I don't, you know, fully understand that. But when you're in it, it's like, it's incredible. It's just a really incredible experience. And also to bring men into this space, to know that they're sisters, and that honoring and that respect, you know, for women in this fire space, is just such an important part of all of our growth, of treating each other with human dignity. So it's really, it's not just, you know, using fire, you know, as a practice, but it feels like it's healing our souls too, when we can reach out and be a part of this at a worldwide level.
Thank you all so much for those incredibly thoughtful responses. I wanted to move it into Q&A, and unless anybody had anything else they wanted to say, before we open that floor. Okay, well, oh, go ahead, Naomi.
Oh, I guess I was just gonna say, like how Kelly said it, you know, worldwide fire, this is an issue for all of us. I think one thing that we always say is, like, fire doesn't know borders, and firefighters all speak the same language. You know, you might actually speak a different language, but we use the same terminology. We're experiencing the same things. We use the same tactics to fight fire. And so obviously with my work, I'm working firsthand internationally, but I think we're going to see more and more of that. You know, I don't know how many people went up to Canada this last year to help out, but fires are the same everywhere. Might be burning in different fuels, but fire behavior rules are going to apply. And I think the more resource sharing, the more experience sharing we can do, it's just going to help us learn from each other and be the best firefighters that we can.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. What an incredible conversation. And I wanted to introduce Meredith, Emily, and Ellery. There's some amazing colleagues we've been working with that lead AmeriCorps programs and are supporting so many more young people being exposed to and learning with fire. So Meredith, Emily, and Ellery, would you like to introduce yourselves and go ahead and ask any of the questions that you've chosen from the chat?
Yeah, sure. Emily, this is Emily Ray. She's
Hi.
a field specialist with AmeriCorps St. Louis, which is actually the program that I'm a staff member for. I'm the Wildland Fire Program Coordinator for AmeriCorps St. Louis. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. And actually that's kind of how I got connected with Lily, got involved with the Women in Wildfire group. And I don't know if Ellery's on, if she wants to introduce herself, but Ellery is also formerly a member of AmeriCorps St. Louis, and is actually in her first season with the Shawnee National Forest as a wildland firefighter. So we want to thank everybody for having us in this space. This conversation has been incredibly insightful, I think. And with that, I've just got a couple questions pulled from the chat. I think just kind of touching on what has been kind of discussed most recently. I believe Rand, I hope I'm saying names correctly, but I believe Rand asked, how would you all respond to climate change activists who may say cultural burning has a carbon footprint? I know there's been some discussion in the chat, but if you all want to bring it to the live space, I'm sure folks would love to hear more on what you all have to say.
I would be honored to. So, and then there was a thread on biochar. Well, I come to this space having studied biochar in the tallgrass prairie system in the Midwest. So that's where I got my first soil science and plant ecology experience, and knowing how pyrolysis, like plants burn under high pyrolysis and integrated back into the soil system, it benefits ecologically those plant communities. So I've learned this as a model from what indigenous tribes did for millennia in the Amazon basin. So this biochar, that's kind of one of those hot topic conservation biology or restoration ecology topics, was birthed from indigenous peoples intentionally burning in different parts of the world. And for a long time, that wasn't acknowledged by anthropologists. And it wasn't until I was in graduate school many moons ago, the first time, that it was acknowledged, and I signed on to this project to look at the effects of biochar on tallgrass prairie ecosystems. So fire and prairie have a very close relationship and restorative goals in this part of the United States. So I study now how cultural fire affects the soil profile and how it is a responsible and a long-term carbon storage that's created with these lower temperature burns. So I learned that in the West, and that's what my data is pointing to as a quantitative scientist. So that's, as an indigenous person doing this, like, it's exciting. Now I'm in the Midwest where there's grassland ecosystems and really intricate taproot systems. So they're long and they hold water and they have nutrients. And we're also adding fire into that. That's going to increase its potential for carbon storage, as well, pulling those hazardous greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and giving them a safe place to be stored. So it all points to, we need more burning, we need more lower temperature burns. And people, I get the smoke thing. That's the one thing I kept running into, even as like a prescribed burner. Not necessarily a cultural fire burner, which gets even more like kind of, people may not know the intentions behind it, that our ancestors know and have known for a while. But the idea is that it produces less toxic smoke that's emitted. I mean, fires that burn grass are going to do a lot less damage than fires that burn gas stations, homes, if you think about the smoke that's emitted. So there are now papers coming out that points to prescribed burning is safer and better for our health, as well as climactic effects, than catastrophic wildfire. So the way that I situate my science, because like I'm a soil and plant person doing this quantitative empirical data, the way that I always enter spaces is, this is not Western science validating indigenous knowledges. This is Western science catching up to what indigenous knowledge has been telling us for millennia. So yeah, thank you. And I hope that can help.
Yeah, amen. That was very, very well said. And yeah, so fire produces smoke, of course, but smoke from a prescribed fire is very different, and its benefits so much outweigh the smoke that we will inhale. But that said, I want to go completely off topic for a second and just say that one of the things we all do have to consider is that smoke, whether it be from wildfire or prescribed fire. That is one of the things that I worry the most about, that I've exposed myself to over the years, that we all expose ourselves to. And I want to try to make sure that people understand, and women should understand, like Naomi said, wanted to be one of the guys, that it shouldn't be a toughness contest. We're not out there to try to inhale more smoke and be tough and cool. We should all try to protect our health as much as possible. Wear a good smoke gaiter, wear the smoke goggles if you need them, position yourself to get out of the smoke as much as you can, because it's not good for any of us. None of us should be breathing that smoke. Even good prairie grass smoke is still not great for us. So protect yourself.
Meredith, were there some other questions you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you all for that insight. I think, yeah, just echoing what Susan said, especially about, protecting yourself as somebody who is in prescribed burning. currently, you know, that is a huge topic that we've been hearing a lot about, especially at the treks that we went to where we met Kelly a couple weeks ago. So another question that we've got is this is not that this is specific to women, but there is some harshness and harm perpetuated in some crews that can be a hindrance to mental health and confidence, especially in young people exploring a new career on top of experiencing some traumatic events. Do you all see some encouraging practices taking place to support mental health and physical health? And I think Rebecca touched on this a little bit, but if you all have more to add, I think the folks would love to hear that.
I can answer it a little bit further as well. I know that throughout my career, I have definitely, I think it, for all women, our path through fire is going to be different. It's going to look different. And, you know, I think Naomi said that, you know, you just want to be one of the boys. And at some point throughout my career, I decided I didn't want to be one of the boys. I wanted to be a woman who does fire. And I think that was a huge turning point for me, and it changed how I interact with the men on my crew, but also how I show up for other women that I work with as well. And I think that I have worked with a lot of absolutely wonderful men who are incredibly supportive of me being in this space and other women being in this space. Are there still some good old boy clubs? Yes. And I think that it's important that women in this field support each other, because there are going to be situations where you feel very alone and you are the only woman, but you always have a phone, you always have someone to call. I know that throughout my experience in fire, how I fit into the crew has changed, but I've had to learn different techniques to be a part of the crew and figure out what my role is in the crew and how I fit in with the crew. And I think that has a lot to do with my personality, because I have a really big personality that can sometimes rub people the wrong way just in general. And the fact that I am a female in this space as well, a big energy, and I ask the hard questions and I challenge people. But to answer the question, I think the culture is shifting. And if you find yourself in a place where it's incredibly difficult, we have the ability to move. And I don't think that that's running. I think that you need to set yourself up for success and be around people who support you. And if you are not currently in that place, and that place has not caught up with the times, find yourself a circle and people, whether they are working beside you or a phone call away, because that has saved me on numerous occasions as well. It's just picking up the phone and having somebody who I can say, like, this is happening to me, and I don't have to explain why that's not okay or why that doesn't feel right. Like, there are many women in fire and many women who want to support other women in fire, and we have all been the only woman on a crew or the only woman on a fire, and we know how that feels. And so there's lots of men who are very willing to support you, but there's a lot of women who out there who are also willing to support you, and just a phone call away to say, hey, I'm going through it right now. Have you been here? And sometimes it's just having the validation of you aren't the only one that's gone through this, and there is support, and we can all get through the other side together.
I just wanted to say, I know it's at 8:30, so if folks need to drop off, completely understand and full support it. Thank you so much for being here, and would love it, Meredith, if you could maybe ask one more question. Panelists, if you need to drop off, totally understandable, and if not, we'd love to have you for one more.
I think
Kelly, your hand raised. Oh, sorry, Chris. Kelly, did you have your hand raised? Were you wanting to say something?
Hey, I just want to follow up on that. You know, I've really struggled with this for a long time, you know, that, 90% of the people are really good. It's the 10% of the jackwads that really make life really difficult, right? And so, and sometimes, none of us, feel comfortable making a federal case out of things because it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, I chose to step into a male dominated environment. I'm going to have to tough it up and which I think I've done, but still it's like that's no excuse for dismissive, disrespectful bullying to be experienced in the workforce. So I've really struggled with this a lot throughout my whole career. And it should not get to the point where a woman has to, file a grievance or a complaint that it's gotten that bad, right? And so I really kind of spent some time kind of thinking about how do we re-engineer this? Like, what's the root of this? And one thing that I found, and it's just anybody can try it. It's for free. It gets a conversation going, right? So Harvard Business Review has, leadership articles that, I think you can get 3 free articles, a month. And if you're part of a team and part of a crew, and especially think about this in your 20s and 30s, because you're really trying to navigate, what success looks like, as an aspiring, person in this career. We have 6 minutes for safety. How come we don't have something like 7 minutes for leadership? You start a conversation on a Monday morning, grab an article, don't go right for the sexual harassment article right off the bat, but just in terms of there's attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, the way you were born and raised. We all come at this with a different background. And the most important thing you can do is start having a conversation with the people that you work with every day. Because do you want to be known as, that guy who's a jackwad, or do you actually want to be known as that guy who's super supportive of women on the crew and really super supportive of diversity and inclusion? Although I try not to use those words a whole lot anymore, because really what we're striving for is a high performance team, because we really want to be safe, effective. We want to be learning. We want to be excited about coming to work. There's all these things that I think we can do ourselves and really create an environment that then will hopefully, begin to really melt away any sort of need to get to the point where I can't take it anymore. We shouldn't have to do that, as men and as women. That we should really feel like I love this team that I'm working with. And if it's not working, we need to understand why, and then begin this opportunity of, hey, let's test this 7 minutes for leadership, and what makes good leadership in our crew, what makes good crew cohesion, what makes us a high performance team. You name it, bring any topic in that you can now begin to have this open conversation, with how you want your team to perform and why it's in what you appreciate about your team too. So, give that some thought. I think culture is changing. This is a long, hard slog. And yes, there will be people out there, and remind them, are you an asset or a liability? And how do you want to be known when I leave your crew? Because we all talk. And so having that kind of feeling out there that, I guess I can change. And hopefully, people do recognize that some of their attitudes and behaviors and beliefs no longer serve your crew well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Kelly. I think that's actually kind of a good leading question to the last 2 that I've got here. So I guess, how, if at all, have you all as panelists witnessed cultural changes in the field? And also in conjunction with that, how have your male counterparts benefited from any cultural shifts you've seen?
I think I can answer the second question, like how my male counterparts have benefited from any of the cultural shifts that we've seen. I think some of the cultural shifts I've seen have allowed people to be human and accepting of that. And so I think that really positively impacts mental health, because we all have feelings, whether we're men or women. We all have frustrations, we all have at-home struggles or at-work struggles. And I think that the way the culture is shifting, we're allowed to be human and we're allowed to feel those very human emotions, and we have a space where we can talk about it more, and we reach out to each other more. And I don't think that that's a very like specific male or women thing. I think it's a very human thing, and I think it's very important for the culture and how the culture is shifting in a positive way. And some people might call that soft or weak by showing emotion, but we all show emotion. And we have this idea that men don't show emotion, but like anger is an emotion, and when you see somebody stomp off or fly off the handle, that anger is emotion, and it's probably a manifestation of an emotion that they weren't allowed to feel when they are hurting or they're upset or they're stressed out or they're anxious. But anger is the only expression of emotion that they are culturally allowed to feel. So when we open the door to create a culture where we're allowed to talk about those softer things, we prevent this extreme show of emotion in a lot of ways. And I think it really, really positively affects mental health all the way around when we have that space where we're allowed to be human.
I'll just add a quick note to that. Thank you. That was really powerful, Rebecca. Like, just being in the fire world and learning about how people are speaking up about mental health, how there needs to be program implementation for wildland firefighters that are on assignment at various like seasonally, and then like the downtime, a complete shift in environment and mental wellness. So I really appreciate the wildland firefighters that are opening up those honest conversations and are leading to resources that could be there, that at least are at their beginnings of a conversation in mental health. As a like side related note, so I am a professor, and before I was a professor, I was a lecturer in California, and learning like the mental toll that wildfire is taking on our young people, like seeing catastrophic weather events and climactic events. So you're there learning, and in our class, we take them out on the land where just that dialogue flows about, how they feel about their landscapes and what they care about, how it's affecting their mental health. And fire is playing a role in that, seeing all the devastation that unfortunately for a lot of people, that's their touchstone of fire. I think for us, it's a very different perspective and a different way of viewing it. But if that's your touchstone, like, of course, it's going to take a toll mentally. So for just like the general public and in young people in particular, so I wrote this paper called Solastalgia, and it's literally environmental and climactic grief, but how working with fire, specifically cultural fire, it invites you to work side by side with people stewarding with fire and camaraderie. So kind of when you're on the line, having that shared experience and upliftingness of purposely placing fire for the betterment of our ecosystems and our mental, and for us, our cultural health. And I appreciate, like I said, the allyship and the people that are on the line and fighting fire, that are able to open up those conversations about mental health and what that could look like on the other side, like placing fire and how it coincides with mental wellness. So yeah, I talked to a lot of firefighters, and they're like, wow, I feel really good doing this instead of, being at camp and fighting fire. I feel better placing fire. So I really appreciate it. However that's helpful. That's kind of the mental health and culture fire and the purposely placed fire experience.
Well, thank you all so much. I think this is a great time to be wrapping up. So appreciate our panelists. Let's all unmute if you like. Clap for the panelists. Snaps. Thank you. What a incredible year to be doing this with you all and time. And please know that this panel will be recorded and posted on our Women in Wildland Fire website. And Chris and Ben and Reva, please go ahead and say anything last you'd like to say before we head out of here.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody. Like, as I said at the beginning of the event, like this marks a shift in the structure and the way we've approached this topic in this panel discussion. And it was really amazing just to see the diversity of opinions and like how all of that melded together to cover all those different topics. So thanks.
Hey, this is Reva, just real quick. Awesome panel. You guys did a fantastic job putting together this group of badass women. So super, super proud to be partnered with y'all. So excellent. Thanks all.
Yeah, wonderful work. Thank you all. We will be posting this on the Grassroots Wildfire Fighters resources tab page as well. So that'll be an easy way for you folks to be able to share it out. And the thought that I have on my mind is if you set an ice cube on a table and the freezer is 20 degrees and you click it up to 21 and 22 and nothing changes, right? But once you hit 33, everybody knows and it's undeniable. I think the flood that's going to happen with this momentum as it continues, because you all are here tonight and doing the work that you're doing, is going to be undeniable, and I can't wait to continue to see it. So thank you all.
Well, wonderful. And again, Meredith, Emily, and Ellery, thank you so much for monitoring